friends. Ollie here, and I've got another loaf of bread for you today. Today's loaf of bread comes to us from the Chinese classic text on the art of living, the Tao Te Ching. And it goes like this. When people see some things as beautiful, other things become ugly. When people see some things as good, other things become bad. Being and non-being create each other. Difficult and easy support each other. Long and short define each other. High and low depend on each other. Before and after follow each other. Therefore, the master acts without doing anything and teaches without saying anything. Things arise and she lets them come. Things disappear and she lets them go. She has but doesn't possess. Acts but doesn't expect. When her work is done, she forgets it. That is why it lasts forever. I wanted to share this verse with you today because it is probably the clearest and most concise description of what I've been trying to talk to you about lately. So in the opening part of this quote, Lao Tzu is essentially describing the relativity of all classification. He's talking about how these things that we regard as opposites really define each other and are one and the same, merely different aspects of a single quality. He also describes the process by which we create these dichotomies in our minds. Because the moment we assign one value to a thing, we automatically and unconsciously assign an opposite value to opposite things, or things that we at least perceive as being opposite. So when people see something as beautiful, they automatically see other things as ugly. When they see some things as good, they automatically see other things as bad. That's pretty simple. The real pitfall of duality is when we start to believe that these things are objective truths, that a certain thing is really good, and that this quality of goodness is not something that we project or that we create in our minds, but that it's actually something that is inherent to the thing itself. As soon as we start to believe that, we become deluded by this binary system that the mind uses to evaluate its environment and its internal environment as well. So it's very dangerous when we forget that the values that we assign to things are merely subjective, and again, they're there to help us to better navigate the world. So again, to reiterate, as soon as you evaluate something as good, you automatically and oftentimes unconsciously project a value of bad onto other things. So that's the first part of the quote. The middle part is where Lao Tzu gives you examples of how these things are not actually independent of each other, these qualities that we tend to regard as opposites. He says being and non-being create each other. In order for there to be being, there has to be non-being. In order for there to be stuff, there has to be nothingness or space. Without the space, there can be no stuff. Without the stuff, there can be no space. These things define each other. Just like long and short, difficult and easy, high and low, before and after. He goes on just to give you a few more examples. But the part that I really love is the third section of the quote, because this is where Lao Tzu tells you what it looks like when someone adopts an attitude of non-duality. Lao Tzu tells us the master who has adopted a state of non-duality, or who lives in a state of non-duality, acts without doing and teaches without saying. So here we have to separate out the physical action and then the mental component, okay? He acts or she acts without doing anything, meaning her actions are spontaneous. They're not thought out and pre-planned, because it's very easy for us to get into this trap of overthinking and second-guessing ourselves. The master is spontaneous, and the master teaches without speaking. That is to say, she teaches by leading as an example. She shows instead of telling. Things arise, and she lets them come. So what happens, she accepts. And when things disappear, she lets them go. Great parallel to something Marcus Aurelius said in his Meditations. He says, receive without conceit and release without struggle. Lao Tzu tells us that the sage has but doesn't possess. Now, how does that make any sense? Well, to have something is physical. I have a house, but I don't possess my house. Because the possession part comes in here, and it's an attachment. It's this clinging to something, identifying with it, because it's become part of you and part of who you think you are. So the master has stuff, but she doesn't possess the stuff. She's not attached to it. And that relates back to what we just talked about, right? She takes things when they come, and she lets them go when they go. And last but not least, the master acts, but doesn't expect. She does things. She may have goals and preferences, outcomes that she's aiming for, but she has no expectations about whether or not those outcomes will materialize. And in fact, she has no expectations about what will happen and what the results of her actions will be. So again, now we're dealing with renounce and rejoice, right? Take pride in the action. Take joy in the doing. And whatever comes afterwards, let it go, because it's not yours. Anyway, that's it for me. Glad I was able to check in with you before work. And hopefully I will see you tomorrow. Until then, live well, my friends.